everybody. It's that time again, time for story time with Nonna. I've got a book that I had when I was a little girl because I really love horses. I still love them. And it's called Album of Horses. We're going to be doing 3 different stories from this. There are not so many pictures, but they're all about horses. And I rode horses for many years, and my children did. So let's get started with this one that's one of my favorites. It's called The Routine of Happiness. The routine of happiness. A horse's actions are based on habit. Variety may be the very spice of life for people, but for horses, routine is their peculiar happiness. Eat, sleep, work at the same time every day, year in, year out, time without end. There was once a workhorse that lived exactly by the clock. His name was Charlie, and he furnished the power that operated the presses for a printing house. Every morning, just as the factory whistle blew, Charlie was hooked to a pole that was connected to a shaft. And before the blast had pinched off in silence, Charlie was at work, walking around in a circle, turning the shaft, which was a big wheel at the top of it. By means of a pulley, the big wheel connected into a smaller wheel, and as Charlie turned the shaft, the pulleys inside the factory went around and worked the printing presses. All morning and all afternoon, too, Charlie walked in his perpetual circle, hearing nothing but the flump of his footsteps and the hum of the presses, seeing nothing but his path and the sparrows that bathed in the dust he made. Charlie liked the sameness of his days. They were not drear to him at all. He knew what to expect and when. He could have kicked over the traces and run away to green fields, but such a thought never occurred to him. And Mr. Dooley, the happy Irishman who took care of him, knew he could be trusted. After starting Charlie off, Mr. Dooley went about his own business and did not show up again until noontime, when he came striding along with a nose bag of rustling oats. Afternoons were just like mornings. Walk around and around, turn the shaft, swish flies, sweat and dry off, keep walking, walk the sun out of sight. When the evening whistle blew, Charlie stopped as if a stone wall had suddenly risen before him. This was a pleasant time of day. Mr. Dooley, unhooking him and making little confidential remarks, and men and boys whistling down the stairs and out of the building. One always stopped to give Charlie a slice of apple. The fragrant juices tickled his senses. He could smell the apple long before he saw it. Then crunch, crunch, and the sweet juice slaking his thirst. Life was good. It had a pleasant pattern. Year after year, winter and summer, rain or shine, Charlie ran the presses until at last he grew old in service. His coat, which had been once smoky dark, was now white, and his mane and tail were sprinkled with gray. One morning, Charlie's orderly world suddenly went topsy-turvy. A stunning black horse was brought into his stable and cross-tied in front of his stall. And Mr. Dooley was putting Charlie's collar over the young black's neck and Charlie's bit into the young one's mouth. Instinctively, Charlie disliked the newcomer. He broke into a snort and pinned his ears back. Mr. Dooley went right on with his buckling. "By the hole in the seat of me pants," he laughed, "I do believe the old creature's jealous already." Then the young horse was backed in between the shafts of a wagon and led out into the morning. And before Charlie knew what was happening, he was being tied to the tailboard. He tugged at his halter, trying to turn toward his familiar road, past his factory, past other factories, past houses, across a railroad track, and always he could hear the hoofbeats ahead. Strange new smells began mingling in his nostrils. Plowed earth and apple blossoms. Suddenly the hoofbeats ahead came to a stop, and Mr. Dooley was at his side, untying him, now leading him through an open gate into a green pasture. Then one by one his shoes were pulled off, and even his halter was taken away. "'Tis little I can think to say, Charlie," Mr. Dooley murmured. "You see, it's like this way, Charlie. You've earned a rest. The grass and trees is buddin', and it's a soothin' piece of sod you got here, ain't it, Charlie? Aye, and I'll come back every once in a while to give you a whisking over and an apple out of me own wages, and may the Lord preserve you, Charlie." Without a backward look, Mr. Dooley gathered up the horseshoes, put the halter over his arm, and went out the gate. He clucked to the young horse, and the wagon went creaking on its way. Charlie began to tremble violently. He threw back his head and sent out a great cry of loneliness. He ran along the fence line ahead of the black horse, winning him to stop, imploring him. But the young horse did not hesitate. He trotted briskly along, step by step, until the sound of his hoofs and the creaking of the wheels grew fainter and fainter, and then died away. For a long time, Charlie stood in the corner as if he were picketed to the earth. He had a kind of naked feeling without his shoes and his harness, and he felt a nothingness inside. There was no one in sight but an old hound dog sniffing along the hedgerow, bent on bird business. Slowly, Charlie footed his way toward the dog, and as he walked, he felt a wet coolness under his feet. He pawed the grass, stirring up a delicate scent. He tore a mouthful and found it tender and succulent. He forgot about the dog. He tore a mouthful and found it tender and succulent. He forgot about the dog and fell to grazing, and he grazed the morning away. Toward noon, the bright sun beat down on his back, and a stupor came over him. He sought the shade of a big cottonwood tree, and there, with a sweet quid of grass in his mouth, he slept standing, dozing the afternoon away. For a few days he enjoyed his barefoot freedom. Then gradually a great longing filled him. He missed his old way of life. Morning came and no one said, "Move over with you, Charlie." "Ach, but it's a grand smiling day." And there was no familiar path to tread, no nosebag at noon or apple at night, only earth and sky, and between them an aching emptiness. The grass seemed to lose its flavor, and Charlie ate less and less of it. He grew gaunt, and his upper lip hung loose, quivering like that of an old man who cries easily. Mr. Dooley came to visit him and shook his head. "We got the poor creature here just in time, all right," he said to no one at all. "His work days is done for sure." And then, one early morning, the wind blew across the town, picking up smells and sounds on its way. The whistle of Charlie's old factory came to him faintly. The sound pulled a trigger in his mind and fired him to act. Resolutely, he headed for the cottonwood tree and began walking around it, buckling down to his work as if he were pulling the pole through the turned shaft. Around and around he went, trudge and turn, keep walking, swish flies, sweat and dry off, trample the grass, bend it down, wear the path bare, keep going. All morning he traveled the circle. At noon, the faraway whistle stopped him. He left his tree and grazed his way toward the creek. Then he rolled in the mud along its banks, first this way and then that. Afterward, he stretched out in the sun and dozed a bit until the afternoon whistle woke him. Again, the trigger in his mind. Struggling to his feet, he went back to his self-appointed work. All afternoon, he wore the path deeper. By the evening, the wind had told him when to stop. He quit work suddenly and began frisking around the pasture like a youngster let out of school. He waded in the creek and drank deep. Then he splashed until the water pattered all over his belly. He felt good. Now Charlie knew what to do with each day, and the hours ran together as smoothly as water flowing downhill. In time, a great change came over him. He didn't look like a colt exactly, nor did his gray hair turn black, but his happiness showed in many ways, in the luster of his eye, in the spring in his step, in the round-barreled look of him. Growing old was not bad at all, so long as there was something to do. Charlie had made his own work. He was back in harness again, the good, comfortable harness of routine. I hope you like that story. I've been reading that one for many, many years. And there's other good stories in here that we're going to explore next time. So join me, if you will, and have a wonderful day. I'll see you again on Storytime with Nonna. Bye.